Right. So, with house prices down this month and inflation down this month and fixed rates up this month and prime rate up this month and unemployment up this month, where are we headed in the mortgage market? It's episode 149 today on Canadian Mortgage Weekly, Canada's first and only weekly mortgage news video podcast. My name is Joe Bladdick, and I'm talking about if it's the right time to go with a variable rate today with inflation down to 2.8%. Feel free to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. I'm really interested to know. Myself, with 13 years experience in the mortgage industry, I can tell you for sure that it's something I've been considering because Tiff Macklin's goal of getting inflation down to 2% has been the prerogative all along. And right now, with inflation at 2.8%, we are very close to that goal. If we take a look at inflation numbers over the last 12 months, we did see inflation in Canada peak at 8.1% in June of 2022. 8.1% was a staggering number, 4 times higher than where we thought inflation should be. And with that in mind, that's why the Bank of Canada chose to start raising interest rates in such a hurry and such a panic. And that's caused a lot of people to start seeing higher interest costs and higher mortgage payments and higher amortizations if you're on a fixed payment variable rate mortgage. But now with inflation approaching 2%, currently sitting at 2.8% for Canada for June of 2023, so close to that 2% target, is it the right time to go with a variable rate mortgage? Those who have been in a variable rate mortgage up until now have seen their interest costs rise and have seen their mortgage payments rise. And if we look back to 2008, 2009, those folks that were in a variable rate mortgage saw their payments go up during the economic crisis of 2008, 2009. But then after the crisis had passed and inflation came back to normal at that time, rates went down considerably. And those in a variable rate mortgage, 2009, 2010, ended up beating out those in a fixed rate mortgage from those 2, 3 years prior. So is it the right time to go variable with inflation at 2.8% currently and prime rate at 7.2%? Well, let's look at this today. If you're just joining me today, my name is Joe Bladdick. I'm a broker in the mortgage industry with 13 years experience. And we're talking about if it's the right time to go with a variable rate mortgage now with prime rate at 7.2% and inflation at 2.8%. It's an honest question. And it's a question a lot of my clients have been asking me this week with inflation currently at 2.8%. And my answer is it depends. It depends whether or not it's the right time to go variable. Variable rate mortgages historically have offered a lot of flexibility for Canadians. One of those key flexibilities is the fact that if Bank of Canada starts decreasing rates, which we're seeing signs that it could possibly start decreasing rates in the near to later future. One of those being unemployment has risen 2 months in a row in Canada. And another one being that inflation is coming back down to that 2% target. Those are two pressures that that the Bank of Canada will start considering in terms of either pausing interest rate hikes or lowering interest rate hikes. And being in a variable rate mortgage gives you that flexibility that if rates do go down, that the customer starts to benefit immediately. If you're locked in at today's fixed rate, which is 5.5%, 5.6%, and variable rates start to go down or prime rate starts to go down, you're stuck in that fixed rate for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So being stuck in that fixed rate for 3, 4, 5 years when rates go down doesn't really offer you that flexibility. And if rates go down, fixed rate mortgages have an interest rate IRD, interest rate differential penalty calculation, which can make penalties on fixed rate mortgages extremely high. Sometimes I've seen penalties for fixed rate mortgages be upwards of $30,000. So, quite a significant number when we're looking at fixed rate mortgages. Now, for variable rate mortgages, another flexibility they offer is the penalty calculation for variable rate mortgages is much lower. It's 3 months interest. And with a 3 months interest penalty, no matter where you are in the mortgage term, that offers the highest flexibility with the lowest cost to be able to break that mortgage and go into something different. As a matter of fact, a lot of people, what they would do is break their variable rate mortgage to go into a better variable rate mortgage because the flexibility there is only a 3 months interest penalty. So there are a lot of considerations there. Another consideration that variable rate mortgages offer is that you can actually lock into a fixed rate at any time. No charge, no penalty. Obviously, you can't go backwards from a fixed rate to a variable rate, but it does offer that flexibility to be able to go from a variable rate into a fixed rate. If you're just joining me today, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, streaming live on Canadian Mortgage Weekly, Canada's only weekly mortgage video news podcast. And we're talking about if it's the right time to go into a variable rate mortgage. It's the first time I've been talking about variable rate mortgages being a possibility, really, in the last 12 months. In the last 12 months, I've really been looking at fixed rate mortgages, especially 2 to 3 year fixed rates. A lot of my clients specifically tell me, Joe, we think that rates will come back down in 2 to 3 months. No, 2 to 3 years, not 2 to 3 months. But as we've seen, Bank of Canada and the Canadian government have been raising interest rates because inflation hit an 8.1% peak in June of 2022. And now we're looking at inflation at 2.8%. And that is so close to that 2% target that Tiff Macklem, our finance minister, has been aiming for this whole time. And in my 13 years experience, I got in just after the financial crisis. And I had a variable rate mortgage during the financial crisis. My rate did go up. And I saw a lot of people locking in. And what I ended up doing is sticking variable. And then what happened shortly after is variable rates started to come back down. And as those variable rates came back down, those who had locked in saw their mortgage payments stay the same, their interest costs stay the same, their payments stay the same. And me in a variable rate mortgage, I kept getting letters every time the Bank of Canada decreased interest rates. Your payment is going down. Your payment is going down. Your payment is going down. And that's a great position to be in if you time it correctly. So let's look at a few factors here. Inflation is now at 2.8%. Last month, the month prior was at 3.4%. That represents a decrease of 60 basis points. 0.6. If we look at inflation, the month prior was at 4.4%. That's a 1.0 decrease. Now, if we look at the month prior to that, it was at 4.3%, so not much change, but 5.2% the month prior to that. So we've been seeing a steady decline. And if we look at where inflation could be next month, could be at 2.2% based on the same trend, maybe 2.1%. And then the month after, maybe under 2%. So I think we probably have about 2 months to go before inflation gets to that target of Tiff Macklem's 2%. And when it does, what do you think the Bank of Canada will do? Will it start to pause on interest rate hikes? Will it continue raising rates, or will it start lowering rates? That's one thing to consider. That's the CPI inflation rate in Canada. Now, another inflation rate that we need to look at is core inflation in Canada. And that is remaining a little bit sticky. It's still going down. However, it's a little higher at the moment. Last year at this time, we saw a core inflation rate in Canada at 5.33%, which is pretty high. Core inflation takes into account other things like grocery prices, which, as we've seen, are very high. And also takes into account mortgage interest costs, which, as you know, have been very high as well. But right now, core inflation is sitting at 3.52% for the month of June of 2023. That's compared to 3.95% for the month of May, which was the prior month. So again, core inflation did go down, albeit a little less, 0.43% versus 0.6% with the CPI inflation rate. But it is getting closer to that 2.0 target rate, which the Bank of Canada has been aiming for this whole time that it's been raising interest rates. So with that in mind, if we start looking into the future for the trend on core inflation, we can see that it's also trending down. Might take a few more months to get to that point of 2.0%. But if we look at the trend, we could probably see 2% maybe in 4 months for core inflation. So that would bring us into October, November. Now, if core inflation does hit 2% later on, past September, then there's a thing we need to be concerned about, and that is the September Bank of Canada interest rate announcement. Looking at when that will be on September the 6th of 2023. Bank of Canada will be meeting again to discuss prime rate. And there are news articles coming out right now discussing that an interest rate hike is not off the table for the Bank of Canada just yet, even with inflation where it is at today. Now, unemployment has been ticking up. It's gone up 2 months in a row. It's gone up 0.2% last month. And next month, if it continues to go up again, then we'll have 3 months of steadily increasing unemployment. So that will definitely be a factor with the Bank of Canada's decision whether or not they want to raise interest rates in September. However, if core inflation does not get back to 2% by September, CPI inflation could hit 2%, but if it doesn't by September and unemployment doesn't really increase too much between now and September, then I think an interest rate hike may still be on the table for September 6, 2023, which could put prime rate at 7.45%. So if that's the case, if that actually happens, it's not the right time to go variable. You're still going to be in a better position if you take a 5-year fixed rate for the time being, or maybe a 2 to 3 year fixed rate might be better for you. It's all depending on where you want to sit at, your risk level tolerance, what your plans are for your home ownership goals. It's a lot of things we need to discuss in order to make sure this is the right product for you. And I always recommend talking with a mortgage professional to assess your individual situation. So if the Bank of Canada does increase rates on September 6, 2023, could be the last increase. And then once inflation hits where we need it to hit, then that may be the end of rate increases. And we'll start seeing a turnaround once inflation steadily remains at 2%, with interest rates coming back down to a much normal level. What is a much normal level? Well, we probably will not see rates come down to 1 to 2% where they were 2-3 years ago. However, a lot of professionals in my industry have been talking about interest rates returning to the 3 to 4% range. I think the best solution is to land lofts. Not sure what that means. However, landlords that I've been speaking to have seen their mortgage costs increase. A lot of them now are selling their rental properties and getting out of the market, causing those rental units to be switched into owned units. And that's pushing rental prices up higher. I don't think killing landlords is the best solution because we need more landlords to keep rent prices low, especially now with the Canadian population hitting 40 million in June. And as of this morning, we've seen Canadian population hit 40 million 100 and I think it's 148,000. We've already accumulated almost 150,000 more people since June of 2023, and those people need a place to stay. If we wipe those landlords away, we'll have less rental units, more of these families that are immigrants buying homes, and that's going to push rental prices up higher because there's going to be such a higher demand now for rentals. Landlords right now, a lot of them are in the red. Each month, they are putting money in from their jobs to be able to keep that rental property alive. Some of them can't even afford basic maintenance anymore. And a lot of them have to sell their homes. So if they are selling the homes, that's actually worse for tenants because it's pushing rents higher. Because I'm seeing a lot of those homes being converted into single family homes, or those homes where folks that have just come to Canada, the 4 or 5 of them are getting all jobs and they're buying that home and moving all in together. I know landlords do take that risk, right? They take that risk that costs could go up. And if costs go up, what are they supposed to do? A lot of these landlords are calling, asking me, what am I supposed to do, Joe? I bought this rental property and now it costs me $500 more each month because the bank has raised my rates. Okay, there's no real. Well, a lot of these landlords do have real jobs. That's the problem. They have real jobs and they have this investment that they have to help them retire later on because there's no pensions available anymore. Okay, so if we need to get rid of landlords, question for you, because you make good points there. They're points that I definitely consider. If we do get rid of landlords, who's going to own the homes? A lot of these homes right now are even being bought up by financial institutions. There's a couple real estate agents in the market right now that have told me that they sometimes get more purchase agreements written up by actual corporations that are buying homes. And these corporations now are monetizing housing. They're turning housing into a business. And those corporations have tons of capital and they're able to weather the storm. If we take more homes away from the mom and pop landlords and put them into corporations, that could even push rent prices up higher in the future. It's a sticky situation, I know. A lot of landlords are not the greatest landlords at all. I really like your comments. It's good to have perspective on landlords for sure. A lot of these landlords, they are eating these costs of the higher mortgage rates, hoping that time will pass and that cost will come back down. So, getting back to my point here, is it the right time to go with a variable rate mortgage? If you believe that inflation is going to hit that 2% mark before September, both core inflation and CPI inflation before September the 6th, when the Bank of Canada meets again to discuss interest rates, then it definitely may be a good time to go variable. And again, it's good to speak to your mortgage professional about this. And it's also good to assess a fixed payment variable rate mortgage versus a variable payment variable rate mortgage. But as for landlords and your comments on TikTok here, I really appreciate them. And I can see what you're saying, because some landlords definitely are ones that should not be in the business and don't really deserve to be landlords. If you're watching on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, feel free to leave comments in the chat here so I can discuss them with you here. So what's happening with house prices as we're looking at variable rates? Well, the national average house price in Canada has been rising steadily since February to May of 2023. My apologies there. And in June of 2023, we actually saw the average national house price drop 0.7% to 709,000 and change. So with that in mind, that normally happens in the summer. But what my concern is, will it go back up in September, October? Because usually we see house prices rebound in the fall as the market goes back, as the kids go back to school and people go out shopping for homes again. What's happening to the bond yield in Canada today? And the bond yield I like to talk about because it predicts and it is what Canadian banks base their fixed rates off of. Well, the Canadian bond yield has been sitting at 3.86% today. It's been steadily rising since May. However, it did hit a peak of just over 4% in early July. So it's been hovering just under that 4% target rate since just at the beginning of July. Inflation sitting at 2.8% for Canada. American inflation currently sitting at 3%. They're also aiming for a 2% target rate. Now, the US Fed is meeting on July 26th to discuss their Fed rate policy. And we'll have to see if the United States raises rates as well. The US does raise rates for its economy on July 26th, then it could be an indication for September 6th in Canada if we're going to raise rates here. If we raise rates in the United States, their inflation rate is very close to Canada's, 3% and 2.8% in Canada. So it could be a model as to what Canada will go after, since we are such close economic partners with the US. Interested to hear your guys' thoughts on all this. Feel free to leave your comments below. All right. If we look at unemployment in Canada, we did see unemployment rise 0.2% in May and 0.2% in June. 2 months consecutive of increased unemployment in Canada. And when I talk about that, if we do see another increase of unemployment for July, it will give that pressure for the Bank of Canada to pause interest rate hikes in September, because if unemployment is rising, that's not good for Canadians. And that's kind of been their goal all along, is to slow down the economy so much so that inflation really slows down. Okay, what's the interbank rate at? And the interbank rate is the rate in which we use as brokers to determine if variable rates are the best and most competitive way to go. Well, with prime rate sitting at 7.2%, the interbank rate is sitting at 5.5%. And with that, the variance is less than 2%, which really makes it not competitive to go with the variable rate. Housing should be free. I have a commenter on TikTok here. And while I agree that housing is one of those basic needs in Canada, free as a taxpayer, that means that I would have to pay for the housing through my taxes. And if we make housing free, then all of our taxes will go up. Is that something we want in Canada? That money's not coming from anywhere. And if the government's going to print the money to pay for the housing to provide for Canadians instead of taxing all of us, then that's going to cause inflation to go back up, which will push grocery prices up even further. I'm not sure there's any real good solution here. No housing would be cheap if being a landlord was illegal. Interesting comments here today. I really see your point here. Not sure if I agree 100%. I think if we eliminate landlords, it'll cause rents to skyrocket. There will be less competition for the rental units. Not less competition, more competition for the available rental units out there. The more landlords, there would be no rent. I see what you're saying. Well, you want to make housing free, which is definitely something that I think all Canadians would benefit from. So if we're looking at the market as where it's sitting at today, fixed rates have been rising steadily. Prime rate has been rising steadily. Inflation has been slowly declining, but steadily declining. And American inflation has also been steadily declining, which is all great news for Canadians right now that are hoping to get into the housing market. If you're looking to get into the housing market, there are programs available out there. Thanks for the roses. And TikTok, I just got roses. Appreciate that very much. So in where was I going with this? Can't remember now that I got those roses. Thanks very much. But with housing right now, if you want to get into the Canadian housing market, there are programs available out there where the local governments, for example, in Barrie, Ontario, Orillia, Ontario, where I'm based out of, there's the Simcoe County Down Payment Assistance Program where they actually provide 10% of your down payment. And you never have to pay that money back so long as you commit to living to that area for 15 years, that specific home. So if you're looking to get into the housing market, that's a great way to get in if you don't have a down payment saved. There's income requirements, obviously. You can't make more than a certain amount of income. And there's also requirements on the geographical area and the maximum house price, etc. If anyone's looking at getting into the market with a down payment provided by their local municipality, I suggest you reach out to your local mortgage professional, or you can reach out to myself, a mortgage broker with 13 years experience. So if you're just joining me here today, we're almost done here for today, but my name is Joe Bladek, host here of Canadian Mortgage Weekly, Canada's only weekly video mortgage news podcast. We're discussing today if it's the right time to go with a variable rate. And we've been also discussing how landlords, rents, and housing. But specifically with variable rates, it's a real hard position to be in because if we take that bet to go variable today, there is a chance that the Bank of Canada has paused interest rate increases going forward, with inflation now at 2.8%, core inflation at just above 3.5% in Canada, trending all down. And it could be that come September, October, November, we could see the Bank of Canada start to shift rates downwards, which, if you took a variable rate, you would start really benefiting those rate decreases immediately. However, it's still a risky bet versus a current 2 or 3 year fixed rate, because a lot of clients do feel that rates will remain high at least for another year or 2 or 3. So locking into a 2 to 3 year fixed rate could put you in a position where you have that locked in rate for now, and when rates do come back down in 2 to 3 years, you'd be in a lower rate scenario. What are you guys' thoughts on all of this? I know that we'll have a lot more clarity after 3 important dates. One of those dates being July 26th, 2023, when the US Fed meets to discuss their interest rate policy and their inflation rates to see whether or not they will increase rates on July 26th. That's date number 1. Second thing will be inflation for July. That will come out. Let's see when inflation for July will come out. All right. Inflation for July for Canada will be out on August the 15th. Right now, sitting at 2.8%. We'll have to see if inflation continues on its downward trend. I'm predicting an inflation rate around 2.2% for July of 2023. And we'll have to see unemployment. If unemployment continues to rise for its 3rd consecutive month. If inflation does get down to 2.2 or lower and unemployment continues to go up higher and the US Fed pauses its interest rate hikes based on their inflation data, then I think we may see a pause indefinitely going into the future. If any of that does not come true, if inflation does not hit 2.2% or high or lower, if unemployment does not go up for a 3rd consecutive month, and if the US does increase rates on July 26th, then I totally believe that another rate hike on September the 6th, 2023 is on the table. If you have any questions about any of this data or about your personal mortgage, whether it's a variable or fixed, and you're looking for some advice on where to go forward, my name is Joe Bladek, host of Canadian Mortgage Weekly, Canada's only weekly video mortgage news podcast in Canada. Be happy to discuss this with you. I have 13 years experience in the mortgage industry. And you can reach me directly on social media, send me a text message, or give me a call. Be happy to discuss your mortgage with you and talk to you about where we're headed in this market. Thanks for watching today on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And we'll see you all next time here on Canadian Mortgage Weekly. All right.